Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GMS Magazine podcast. I am Paco Garcia, and this is a podcast all about role playing games, board games, and the people who make them. Sometimes, only sometimes, the people who play them.
And this is Chris from DSX Machina, game designer, podcaster, writer, professional butthole.
Okay, and by the way, if this has worked out, is because we have practiced.
We've practiced. We now have a schedule. We have a system to go down. We have a timer. We're gonna make sure we keep people's attention for those people who need everything, like me, right? And we were talking about one of the things we wanted to talk about later on, which involves game night, game tips, and I think that's a great idea.
Yes. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Listeners, we've been out for a couple of months now because the summer has got in the way with holidays and heat and an awful lot of stuff, but mostly because we've been planning about how we want to do the podcast. Over the last, almost 3 years that Chris and I have been doing the podcast together, one thing that I've noticed is that we talk a lot, both of us. 40 minutes.
Ramble.
We ramble. Sorry, that's another way to say it. We ramble. So we want to do things a little bit more structured because I also want to be able to chop off little chunks of the podcast and put them in TikTok so people can consume them whenever and however they want. So I thought at the beginning that we could do this live, as in doing streaming every Monday, but I know that that's going to add a fair amount of pressure for us to be dead on time with everything, which quite frankly I'm not sure I want. But if you want us to do this live, I need to know, you need to tell us so we can do something about it. So we're going to have different sections. So we're going to be talking about 10 minutes, give or take, about gaming news and trends. And things that are going to be releases or some controversies or gossip that we may find. We're going to be doing more reviews, about 10 minutes. We're not going to go much further because Chris, you and I talk too much when we do reviews. We've done reviews that were 40 minutes long.
Yes, very long, and we'll make it very quick, very quick.
like that quick. But one thing that I'm really excited about is that I want to do a lot more interviews. This is the reason why I started the podcast, and we haven't done enough interviews, but I really love them. And I still want to figure out how we're going to do this, because considering that A, we're very bad at controlling ourselves, B, that we enjoy our interviews too much, keeping them to 35 minutes is going to be tough. I'm going to have that very, very tough. So we need to see how we're going to organize that. We're going to have to become a lot better. But Chris, what you were talking about is the game night. So why don't you tell humans what is the game night?
The game night is hopefully a section where we can give advice to make your gaming sessions better. Not necessarily recommending specific games, but rather giving you suggestions in order to have a more pleasurable experience, because no one wants to waste their evening.
No, exactly. So this is not about suggesting, what game to play when. No. This is about what happens when people come around. What food to serve, what chairs to have, what happens when somebody behaves like an asshole, or what happens when you have too many people and not enough games, for instance, that sort of thing. And it would be great to have people's input on this one. It would be amazing because I know that I'm not going to be able to cover all the situations. I don't know if you can.
Well, for me, I have a recipe suggestion for today.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So
it turned into an obsession, which I'll talk about.
Okay, so when we get to the section, because this is going to be the other fun thing, and is that now we need to talk about things in order. So without further ado, and because we are still, within the 5 minutes for the introduction, let's go into gaming news and trends.
Like, I had a bunch saved up for the last month, and most of them have fallen out. The volume's been turned down, so it's not terribly interesting. But right now, the only thing anyone really is looking at is Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere RPG.
Which I am
It is the most successful
Hmm.
gaming Kickstarter in history. It's beat out the I'll say, okay, I know it's beaten out the Avatar Last Airbender RPG.
Hmm.
I will predict that before the end is up, that it will most likely surpass and be the number one gaming RPG. I think it may actually do it, especially now it's going in its final days. It's at $14.6 million Canadian,
I tell you
which is
something. I tell you something. Considering that Brandon Sanderson's last Kickstarter did 28 million, and that was for a really unique project where he was going to write a book a month, pretty much, and people were buying things and they didn't know what they were going to get. And he managed to make 28 million. The fact that he's making 14 and he's likely to go up to 18 for an
yeah,
RPG to make 10 millions less than the most gross topping Kickstarter ever is amazing.
yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
But
However,
it shows you how powerful a name that he has. Considering that when people talk about what he's most well known for, and I asked friends, what do you know Brandon Sanderson for? And the only thing that they can come up is that he took over Wheel of Time. There's he
what?
it's when, because I have friends that are like, oh yeah, how do you know Brandon Sanderson?
Yeah,
And almost everyone I talk to says, I haven't read any of his original books, but I do know he took over Wheel of Time. And I go, yeah, he's done Mistborn, Laws of Magic, and a whole bunch of others, but I just find it hilarious that I can't find a single person that's read any of his original work.
that's quite incredible because even I have read some of his work. Not all of it, of course, because he's incredibly prolific, but
Yeah.
even I've read some of his work, and quite frankly, he's very good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things he's probably most well known for in the if you're a board gamer, then you'll know it perfectly because he wrote the Reckoners,
Mhm.
which and there is a board game adaptation for that.
Yeah, but because if you are a role player, the Mistborn adventure game, the Crafty Games released about 10 years ago now,
Hmm.
is also very, very, very good. So I don't
Yeah,
know what this one is going to be like, but I've got mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I want to have that game so bad
yeah, it looks
because
beautiful.
it looks amazing, and I'm sure that the content is going to be fantastic because
Yeah,
I love the Mistborn universe. I think it's absolutely so unique. It's wonderful. However, firstly, $300, ouch. That
yeah,
is a massive, massive hole in my pocket that
yeah.
I neither can or want to afford because we're going to get 6 tomes. I don't know how many pages is that, but that could keep me going for a year. I
It
don't want
yeah.
to invest a year of my life to be able to play a game a few times.
It's also like insanely. I think they're insanely expensive. The fact that the core base entry is $60 for two PDFs for $60 Canadian. Now, in case you're wondering, you could collect my three Amethyst books, which are 400 plus pages each, three of them for less than $60 Canadian. So that gives you an idea. I feel I mean I won't back this campaign because once again I don't have that type of scratch. I mean $195 for like three like a handful of books and so forth, and I'm just like, yeah, 195 got you leather editions of my book. So these are very expensive. Now that being said, the production value looks off the chart. The artwork looks absolutely astounding. Uh, you can get minis for $385, but yeah, it's obviously there are people that have deep wallets that are paying for this.
And
But yeah,
don't get me wrong, I am really happy that this is doing so well, and I really hope that people are going to enjoy it. But,
mm.
and this is not just about the money, because I don't think that $300 is too much for 6 tomes. $50 per tome, I think that's okay. It's a fair price. I would pay it, but it's just too much content. I
yeah,
just I don't
yeah.
have the
Oh,
time or the energy to invest so much in a game. The older I grow, the more I go for smaller, easier to read games that I can prepare in next to no time, and I don't have to invest huge amounts of my life.
Well, I think it's crazy that 30% of all the backers picked the highest tier. That's unforeseen. At the $385 Canadian, oh, sorry, 385 US, which is $500 Canadian, 13,000 people have selected that tier.
That's incredible. But I think that's because they are Brandon Sanderson's fans. I don't think they are
Yes,
role-playing game fans. I don't know.
yeah,
But I
that's
think
$5
they're
million
Brandon Sanderson's
just from
fans.
those backers. So
Yes.
yeah, that's the big news. By the time this episode goes up, I know we're thinking of going back to live streaming. Um, and obviously by the time I'm looking at it now, it's still a 14.62, but it goes it'll be a 14.63 by the time I finish talking. But yeah, 3 days to go. That's the big thing on my end. I also know that D&D Beyond and Paizo have both been rolling back some of their policy changes. D&D Beyond have shifted where you have to rely on homebrew to use 2014 player options. They've reversed that because they're basically saying if you want to work off of the new version of D&D Beyond, you can only use the new version, and if you want to use any older version, you basically have to homebrew it. They're rolling that back because obviously, and unrelated, but Paizo had a community use policy for their third-party content. They were trying to roll that back for some reason, and they've canceled that. So it's interesting that every company is trying now to find ways of pushing their fans to newer and their own in-house content, and all the communities are going, this is not why we play the game.
Well, I would say, as usual, WotC has not learned from their mistakes because they keep trying to push the audience to do what they don't want to do. And they haven't understood that they cannot possibly do that. It's completely pointless. People are going to do what they want to do. You cannot give the tools to make whatever you want, to empower people in that manner, as in giving them a role-playing game, and then force them to use the tools that you want. That didn't happen, didn't work in the past. It's not gonna work now. So I really don't know what they're thinking. And also, they've done another WotC. Guess what they have announced just a couple of days ago.
What was that?
They are hiring a game developer. Guess what they fired in the pre-Christmas layoffs?
What? Or who?
Game developers.
Yeah.
And now, 8 months on, they are looking to fill up exactly the same position again. And I saw in Facebook my friend Dan Dillon complaining about this because he was laid off from WotC, and now he's like, you fired me 8 months ago, and now you are looking to fill up my position 8 months later.
Well, the first thing that always comes to mind is any publicly traded company has to show growth, and when you can't show revenue, you have to generate revenue by cutting people.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've seen it. There's been this trend. People call it late stage capitalism because all these corporations are posting lower than expected sales. So the only way for them to placate shareholders is to fire staff. And so a lot of big companies, especially in the entertainment industry, there's been this big trend in Hollywood right now of a lot of content is dropping significantly because we've had some strikes, but there is now that we're reaching what could potentially be a streaming crash because no one's creating content because they don't have the money to do it. And it's a really easy way to cut staff. Bungie just did it. Microsoft just did it. Like a bunch of companies are doing it in order to placate shareholders, because once you fire people, your shares go up. The only issue is that once you clean, and once you drain that well of talent, you need to find some way to create content. And for the longest time, a lot of people thought AI was the solution. And for several years, a lot of these companies tried to make AI happen. The only problem was the social outcry. But then it turns out that in a more accurate description of what is transpiring, it's not the fact that there's a social outcry and using AI has been vilified. It turns out AI can't do what they wanted to do. That a lot of these AI companies have been overselling AI's capacity to do what they want to do on a reliable level. So now, as a result, they have to quietly rehire all these people. We saw that with X last year, where they were gutting all their staff in order to save money, and then in the last year, they've been quietly rehiring a bunch of them because it turns out you kind of need these people.
Yes, but one thing is to do it quietly, as saying, for instance, hey, Dan, we made a mistake. Would you like to come back? For example. And another thing is like, hey, we need more people. Would you like to work for us? That is, to put it in current trends, not very demure.
I love the fact that it's trending. It's so wholesome. Usually you have this. I always tell people, it's like that's why I like TikTok. TikTok have nice trends. It's not, or every once in a while you see a nice trend, like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah. So there you go. So okay, actually, I have just one tiny little bit of good news that some people are not going to think is good news, but I do, so I am going to give it. Today, Cortalis Publishing has announced that they are ceasing publishing. They are no longer going to keep publishing. Venture Satanis is, ladies and gentlemen, gone. Bestest of ridances. Bye-bye.
Now, for the audience, can you recap why?
Okay. Well, Venture Satanis, he is, I admit, a fairly talented writer who's done a few OSR games in the past, but he decided to go with the anti-woke mob and create work that is on purpose offensive and hurtful just because he feels that he should be allowed to do it regardless of what impact that could have on people. To make matters worse, he is basically a Trump supporter but on steroids. So he just went down a very, very nasty rabbit hole of becoming the victim for anything and everything that happened to him, not because he was doing anything wrong, but because, oh my God, the woke mob are hitting me and they hate me. It's like, dude, you just say an awful lot of crazy shit. You're publishing an awful lot of crap, and you are very vocal about your politics, which is alienating you against pretty much any person who's new that's coming to the hobby. So what did you expect was going to happen? That we were just going to say yeah to everything and give you a round of applause because you think you're very cool calling yourself Satanis? No. So his sales, according to his statement, went down from $1,200 or maybe $1,000 a month to just over 200, which is obviously not enough to sustain him. So for that reason, he's going away from publishing. And I say, please, 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 because it could be very painful. Don't let the door hit you in the ass when you leave.
Yeah, for those people, like there will be other creators to support that have similar content that you can agree with their politics on. And if you are part of the community that is sad about this, you will find another right-wing troll to support. There's unfortunately still quite a few out there.
The thing is, though, I think that if anybody who was listening to this podcast is into that kind of stuff, they probably stopped listening to it by now because that's fine.
That's fine. Every once in a while, you get one of those ones. Yeah.
Exactly. There are other podcasts, and if not, make your own. That's fine. You can make your own podcast about right-wing politics in role-playing games that leave politics out of games. That should be the name of their podcast. So anyway, that is it for this section that's lasted actually 14 minutes. Not bad. We're not doing too bad, aren't we?
We're doing pretty good. I gotta check something here.
Oh, okay. Welcome to the deep dive review. Woo! Now it has begun. Hi. Sorry about that. I just need a pause.
Okay.
I just need a pause so I can cut this and edit it later. The people listening to this episode full, because there's going to be the whole hour episode in YouTube, they're going to see all this bullshit.
And yes, and yeah. So this is all just one segment of a much more entertaining podcast.
Yeah.
I will let you choose
Okay.
because obviously we don't necessarily have time to do all these.
No.
I have 3. I have Darwinauts, I have Wyrmspan, and Alexander Pfister's Boone Lake.
Wyrmspan, if only because Jamie Stegmaier is a friend. We love him dearly, and I want to give him as much airtime as possible. Well, I love him dearly. I think he's brilliant.
Oh, I do love Jamie.
Yeah,
I do.
just looked at me weird. I'm saying, Paco, you're being creepy, and I wasn't being creepy.
No, it's more like, okay, but I've also said in the past I'm not a fan of Wingspan.
I know, but that's on you. He can hate you. I don't care.
Okay, so people go, weird, you don't like Wingspan? My issue with Wingspan is I find it to be very random. I find the fact that there's so many things that can generate points. You're never entirely sure if your strategy is working. You can have a strategy that works really well and then still lose because somebody else had a better strategy. That's fine. Someone will say that's perfectly normal. That's a person's a better player. But your strategy is sometimes very often not dictated by your own creativity or intelligence, but more about these are the cards I have to work with. And so I have no choice but to run this strategy because those are the cards I have. And as a result, you end up creating a situation when you're horseshoed into or like molded into a certain strategy that you can't really get out of early in the game that you have to follow through, and as a result, it ends up not being very enjoyable.
Okay.
And Wingspan does a couple things, which I think is really. Wingspan does a couple things that are really interesting. But a quick summary though is that if you absolutely hate Wingspan, this game will not fix that. It is a better game. If someone wants to say, hey, you want to play Wingspan, I'll say I would rather play Wyrmspan. It is a better game.
Wow. Okay.
If you love Wingspan, you will like this game. If you loved Wingspan but had issues with the randomness, Wyrmspan will alleviate that. But the core aspects of the game doesn't change. So to go over it really quickly, you still have the same board. You still have your 3 cards. You're still getting cards. You're still creating combinations. They do something really, really good. The one thing I didn't care about Wingspan is that as your engine got bigger, you got to use it less and less because every round you got less actions. Because every time you did a round, you got 1 less action. And so by the end of the game, you end up only really maximizing your engine maybe once near the end when you feel it's good, if you did it well enough. Wyrmspan thankfully keeps the same number of actions each round. You get coins and you spend these coins to complete actions. And then there are ways to get new coins. If you complete a row across your tableau, you gain a new coin, which means at the end of the game, you may end up having additional actions. In fact, on my last round of the game, I actually ended up getting 8 coins instead of 6. So I'm able to suddenly use my engine more often. So it's way more satisfying. I really dislike engine builders that end the game before your engine gets any good.
Okay.
So this game alleviates that. It also creates new mechanics where you have to dig into into a cavern in order to put your dragons in there. You have a little cave guy, a little meeple that goes, and whenever you activate a row, you actually take your guy and you move him on the row. So there's a bit more actual thematic connection. In Wingspan, you're just grabbing birds and putting them on a row. There's no tangible connection about what these birds are in relation to the tableau. With Wyrmspan, they're actually creating some thematic tie-in. This tableau are caves that you're excavating, and then you find dragons in these caves. So there is a very tiny, sinewy connection between the two. But everything else very much is similar. Dragons can only go in certain areas. There's 3 different types of caves. You have to excavate the cave. The caves give you one-time bonuses. And then there are the eggs. The eggs don't look like Cadbury cream eggs anymore. They're spotted. They're kind of neat. You get a lot of cards. Once again, there is a guild, a dragon guild, which is a new mechanic where you move around this tracker, and as you do, you get more and more bonuses. And once you reach a certain crescendo, you can get a one-time super bonus, which can also include points. I will say that the one time I played this game, I was immediately got turned off by the fact that you get to choose. You get a handful of cards, and you get to pick 3 cards from this stack. The cards that excavate give you immediate bonuses. Some of them are bonuses that you get immediately, and some of them are based off of the configuration of your board, which means that it is entirely possible, which happened in the one time I played, where my wife got 2 cards that gave her immediate first round benefits, and mine gave nothing because they didn't apply to my board, which means you can create a situation where somebody has a first player advantage completely randomly based on those card pulls, which is an issue I had with the first game. And it's an issue that they unfortunately replicated with the new mechanic. So I said, I'm not going to start this game with you having 3 extra resources and me having none because of a random card pull. So I took my card, I discarded all my cards, draw new cards until I found cards that at least gave me an equal ratio of rewards.
Okay.
So I was a little frustrated at the fact that they did not consider that. Like there should be, like we played a game called Boon Lake, and at Boon Lake, everyone gets the same starting card. So there's no random, I got this random assortment of cards, which means I'm automatically going to have a first round advantage. So I was a little annoyed that Wyrmspan didn't include that. But beyond that, I definitely enjoyed the thematic connection. The dragons look really good. There's a secondary book which is just dragon lore. We were talking about that in our interview, where they created all new lore, and there's instead of using actual mythology, they created just all new lore. Like there's a book called Dragon Facts. It is a 30-page book that has it does tell you what the mechanics are, but it's mostly just there to give you actual lore.
That's very
cool.
That's
really, really cool. And the Dragon Guild is a very neat mechanic. I will say that I defeated my wife in the game, which I have never done. My wife has always beaten me at Wingspan, which has always been part of my frustration. I beat her by, I don't know if you can't really see that. I beat her by 1 point.
Well. So
even solitary point.
Even though you won, you both playing it for the first time, it was actually well balanced, if that's the word.
It was a very, like I said, because I think I discarded my cards, got new cards, so we had equal first round benefits. That absolutely helped. The strategy showed the fact that both of us had points. I think one of the reasons why I won is that in the last 2 rounds where I told you I had extra turns, I was moving around that dragon kill tracker, and I got to a threshold that allowed me to put my little token guy on a point reward, which she did not do. She chose to have an immediate resource. So it's comes down to choices. You take a choice and you think whether or not that choice is going to give you additional resources or not. So yeah, I will say that I generally gave Wingspan a 6 out of 10. I'll say that this game gets a 7 to 7.5 out of 10. I don't think I'll give it an 8. I think I'll sit around 7. I will say my wife's a bit frustrated because she also agrees this is a better game, but we have all the expansions for Wingspan, which we haven't played. And she knows that anytime someone says, let's play Wingspan, I'm going to push for us to play Wyrmspan, which I feel it's less random because the dice tower isn't included, which I like. Okay. It has a bit more strategy with the excavating of the tunnels. There's more thought going into what your choices are. You still have just the 3 cards, and I always wish that you could have expanded that to 4 cards. But I feel that when they do it 3 cards, sometimes you're forced to go with a really bad strategy. Thankfully, it's really easy to gain additional cards, and a lot of your abilities allow you to tuck dragons underneath other dragons and give them points. And then there are other abilities where you can spend your dragon cards to get other things happening, which means that if you get cards, even if it's not a dragon you like, you can at least spend that dragon in some capacity. So there are ways to mitigate bad dragon cards. So in the end, I will say 7.5 out of 10. A very, very enjoyable game, better than Wingspan. And for all that means. Do you have a copy? By the way, my copy of Wingspan looks like it's damaged because that's the review copy they sent me. I got a dinged version.
No, I did not get a copy, so that's fine. I'm hoping to get one at Spiel. I actually managed to bring at the table Taiwan Night Market, which is a game by Zonger that I interviewed him in 2022 when I saw the prototype at Spiel, and this is a very, very interesting game. They took it to Kickstarter. It was very successful, and they managed to bring it out, and I got the review copy at Spiel in 2023, last year. So what is this game all about? In this game, you're going to literally create a typical food night market at Taiwan. So you have...
Whoa, I don't know. How does the name of this game connect? Sorry, go on.
It's one of those magical things, you know. And the players are going to become these kind of entrepreneurs who are going to try to put as many booths and food stalls as they possibly can in the path of the people who are going to go into the market to buy food. It is a game that is simpler than the rules make it appear, because you have a number of phases. So in one of the phases, you're going to draw randomly some numbers that are going to go on the table, and those are going to be where you can build your stalls, your food booths, and you're going to bid for them. You can outbid other players, and there is a second round of bidding if one of the players doesn't get anything, because it's being outbid all the time. And you can get booths as cheaply as 0 coins or as expensively as 22. So you have to think carefully where you want to invest your money. If you manage to get 2 booths together or more, then you make a franchise, and then you make more money. How do you make money? You're going to get a number of buyers coming into the market, and each buyer is going to want to have one different type of food. You have 4 different foods from different booths that you can create. Kebabs, bubble tea, bagels, and ramen. So as people come into the market, if they see a booth with the type of food they're looking for, they stay there, they buy food, and they give you a little bit of money. And that's the money that you're going to be accumulating to buy and create more booths later on. If there are no booths that has the food they want, then they stay in place, and the next round they move down a little chunk of this market, and if they don't find anything, then they move again until the end, and if they haven't found anything at all to eat, then they go hungry. But they stop if you have built a food stand of the type of food they want. Actually, I loved it. There are a couple of things that I really didn't, though. And I'm going to get those out of the way because they're all aesthetic. The board is too busy.
It looks like a very busy board. I'm looking at their Kickstarter now, yeah.
It is way too busy. It has an awful lot of drawings that, beautiful as they are, they do absolutely nothing at all for the game. And once you start putting cards with illustrations on the board, it really muddles things too much. It's a bit overwhelming in the eye. The second thing is that if you look at the board, you will see that the tiles are rectangular. However, the cards are square because they did these beautiful, super cute illustrations, which are kind of axonometric. They're in perspective. But if you put them in rectangular shape, then you wouldn't be able to fit them all, or they would be too small to see the detail. So they've made square cards so they can have a little bit more space to put all the illustration. And that collides, that square shape of the card collides with the rectangular shape of the tile on the board. It doesn't affect the gameplay at all, but if you are a obsessive compulsive designer like me, you will be seeing a square on top of a rectangle, which it was driving me absolutely potty. Really, it was.
Yeah,
driving me
you do
insane.
that a lot, don't you? Like me, like when like you have to make sure your game tableau, where there be an engine, is perfectly aligned. Everything is 100% squared.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I must. So that's it. And at the end of the game, you score points depending on how many food stands you have, how much money you've made, and of course, the person with the largest number of points wins the game. It took us a long time to understand the rules, but the thing is that as soon as we did, we were playing the game super fast. It really is not a complicated game, but it's a game that could benefit from some very serious rules editing. It's just too much. This box came with an expansion that we haven't tried. We will in hopefully the near future. But I would give this game a solid 7. We liked it. It took us too long to play because of understanding the rules. But I reckon that now that we know how it plays, we could sit down and explain to a newcomer how to play the game in about 15 minutes, give or take. So if you're looking for a game that's very gentle, because the competition, there is a fair amount, because you can stop other players from having franchises by creating, putting booths in between their food stalls, and you can outbid them just for kicks. So there is a fair amount of competition, but it isn't that hugely fierce, nasty competition that you see in other games. It's quite nice. It's quite gentle, and even though it's overwhelming in the eyes, it looks quite beautiful once the whole thing is finished, and the illustrations look super cute. So yeah, I would recommend this one if you're looking for a non-conflict based worker placement, resource management, not a lot of it, but a little bit of resource management game.
There you go.
So that's it. That's
So that
my
is
review.
Taiwan Night Market. Do we have time for one more, or are we out of time?
Well, we've done 17 minutes of reviews, but we don't have an interview. So let's do another quick review, shall we?
Okay.
Go for it.
So I'm going to review this game.
What's that game? Because for those people who don't watch but also only hear, Darwinauts.
Darwinauts. So Darwinauts is a game that is similar to Carcassonne. And a quick little thing, basically, let's say that you are playing Carcassonne, but the resources you get from Carcassonne, instead of just being points, actually is a combination of tokens that you could then spend to basically, I guess, create creatures. There's a stack of creatures across the top with resource costs. You could also have your own set that have been put aside with resource costs. On your turn, you can either put one of your 3 meeples down on an area, and that area is a connected terrain, and that will spread across multiple tiles, right, until they are stopped. And then when you withdraw your guys with an action, you gain a token resource for every tile that has your connected terrain. So, for example, if you put down one tile that has 2 terrains slashed in half, you put your guy down on one, and you were to take that, you would just get 1 resource. But if you were to attach, or summon another player that attaches another tile of a similar color that connects up to that terrain, when you withdraw that guy, you would get 2. So you can create these long branches of terrain, and no one else can put their figures on there as long as you have a guy there. So you can create these long chains that you've claimed until another player cuts it off. You can also, as a special action, shift tiles, move locations, and so forth if you need to try to break up a player's resources. And then when you do the action to recall your figures, you draw up to 3 guys back, depending on how many guys you put down, and you get just obscene amounts of resources depending on how much you did that chain. So to recap, on your turn, you can put one of 2 tiles in your hand, you can put one of your guys down, or 2 guys down, and then you could draw additional tiles. So it's similar to Carcassonne, where you're taking tiles and putting tiles down, putting down meeples, taking meeples up to get points. But with this additional mechanic where those resources come in different combinations, which you could then spend to pick up. Very well drawn. It's got a very unique art style. There's a lot of cool cards. The meeples the tokens are wood. Mm-hmm. There's 2 sizes. One's a 3 count and one's a 1 count. There are multiple colors. You get a lot of cards, a lot of tiles. It's not an expensive game done by Green Couch Games. This game, unfortunately, is fundamentally broken.
Oh. That's
we
not
liked
what
it.
I thought you were going to say.
Yes. It seemed like it's a great... If you're like, oh, I like Carcassonne, and this game's got a very unique art style. It's like Carcassonne with a few extra steps. I like games that add extra steps to an existing mechanic, but it has a fundamental problem. And here it is in a nutshell. The game has finite resources. So those token bags I just sent you are finite. There's a handful of each color in 1 value and a handful on a 3 value. On your turn, you get a certain number of actions. I think you get to do 2 actions. And among them, I say you can either put guys down, draw tiles, put down tiles, or you can... And the only way you get resources is to withdraw your guys. When you withdraw your guys, they take away their claims of that region, but you get a crap ton of resources. The last action is buying these monsters, these creature cards, with those resources, and then that's how you get points. At the end of the game, you get points for the value represented on your creature cards. And there are some other ones as well. You get points for if you have a suite, like a full house of different colored monsters, if you have a certain number of the same type and stuff like that. The issue is, because you have to spend an action to claim creatures, and one of the actions is gaining resources, and because resources are finite, I realized halfway through the game that all I needed to do was to simply claim all the resources, which I did. About halfway through the game, I played my tokens, put down my meeples, drew my meeples back up, got more resources, put my guys back down, pulled more resources, put my guys down, put tiles down, pulled more resources. And I never spent those resources, which meant the moment my wife or another player spent resources to get point cards, I would then do an extraction to get those resources. So at that point, there was a point about 75% into the game where I had all the resources in the game, which means no players could bother to put down meeples or take up meeples because there were no resources to claim. And because there were no resources to claim, I locked them out of gaining any points. So all I needed to do was wait until I felt the game end was nearby, and then spend the last 3-4 rounds buying up card after card after card after card after card until I basically the players, all they could do at this point is try to anticipate which monsters I will buy, which will then return those specific resources back to the table, so that they would have to fight over the scraps of those resources and then hope that they could pick up additional monsters. But of course, when it came back to me, I just blew my resources, bought more cards, blew more resources, got more cards. And so I locked out the entire game because no one else could spend resources. And of course, obviously, and they looked at me and said, "You've won this." I go, "Yes. So let's not do that anymore," because it's very clear that I've broken this game. So we decided to make resources unlimited, and eventually got to a point, and my wife ended up winning the game only because we decided to homebrew that rule. But the game is very specific in saying that there are finite resources in the game, which means it is, depending on your game group, an asshole strategy where one player could simply hoard all the resources for 90% of the game and then blow them all in the last 4 rounds, gating all the cards and preventing any players from getting points.
That sounds like a very fundamental flaw of the game. I don't understand how that wasn't picked and a cap on resource given to each player. So, you cannot have any more than 10 of these resources or 15 or whatever. But it sounds like a very basic, out there say, mistake.
Yeah, it is, as you said, it's a fundamental flaw in how this game plays, and we had to check the rules. Like, is that true? And we looked at it and said, yeah, that's true. That you could play the game that way. You could, because near the end of the game, I had almost all the resources, and so the secret to winning is to, if you want to win the game, you just hoard all the resources. But then the only piece of strategy is that you have to time and look at the stack, because basically when the stack of tiles is out, then the game ends. You have to time it so that you can spend all your resources before that tile runs out. That's the only strategy, just to make sure, because obviously if you have all the resources and have no cards, you don't have any points. So one guy with 1 point card will win the game. So you just basically have to time it in such a way that you can spend all your resources to get the cards you need, and then you'll basically win the game.
Well, talking about time, tell us, what is your final verdict?
Well, it's on our sale pile. I think that is a fundamental flaw with the game. I don't like the fact that we have to homebrew it to do that. So unfortunately, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. It's a pretty game. It's not very expensive, but ultimately, we would just play Carcassonne or one of the variations of Carcassonne, which have different rules. I think this one's a pass.
Okay, that is indeed fair enough. And with that, we conclude our deep dive review segment.
With a preview. Next week, or next time, hopefully I'll get a chance to review Boone Lake. And if you thought this game, Darwinauts, had a broken mechanic, oh boy, wait till I tell you about this one.
Okay, well, that's one for next week.
Yeah, so that was my reviews.
And let's dive into the game night. Okay, so I don't know what game tips to give because I don't know what kind of situation are we looking for tonight. I haven't had any particular situation, but I have a question for you because this is something that happens in our group often. For the last few months, not very, because summer and holidays, but we are in my gaming group for Wednesday. We are me, myself, my friend Jose, his wife Anya, my friend Mike, his girlfriend Anna, my friend Mireia, and sometimes her boyfriend Arnau. However, so that's 7 people.
That's pretty good size.
Yeah, it is a pretty good size, except A, we don't have an awful lot of games that can play 7. B, more often than not, it's just the 3 of us. And we have great difficulty trying to decide what game we are going to play that evening. So what advice would you give to a gaming group where the number of people who come to play every week is not always fixed?
Have a lot of games.
Well, you see,
that's the reason why so many people, they talk about their game collection. Like they say, I have 200 games, I have 300 games. If you have a game collection that's large enough, there's always going to be a game that you all can play.
But I have a problem with that, and is that in my case, I do have a large game, well, large-ish game collection of about 490 games, but they are in a different town because I have them in my studio, which is about 15 miles from here.
Okay.
So it's not as if I can just go into a bedroom or a gaming room and say, hey, we're going to play this, and there we go, we have a selection of games. So how do you prepare for a variable number of players.
Well, once again, if you're going to take games to a location and you don't know how many players are showing up, that can be very difficult outside of having a conversation about having reliable attendance. You pick out. Well, I guess one way to do it is to simply make the group game list available for everybody, and let them point out the games that they really want to play. Take a selection of 4 or 5 games, and then you play which one you can play depending on whoever shows up.
Okay, I will.
I mean,
try
that is, yeah, that's the assumption as being the better option. Obviously the best option is to have transparency within the group. This is a gripe of D&D players, because you're dealing with a situation where game groups are usually 4 to 5. So if one person doesn't show up, I have a pattern policy that if one person doesn't show up, we still game. If 2 people don't show up, we cancel. And I make sure that people are fully aware of the consequences of that, to make sure we don't have a situation where 3 people show up and the other 2 people don't. So we maintain that there's absolute communication. And there have been situations where we've realized that we've had to add another player because one person was too unreliable, and we had to have a more reliable large group size. And so it happens all the time with D&D or tabletop role playing. It's a bit more frustrating because the group sizes are so small.
Well, I have my RPG group is 6 people, and I have 2 groups. One for Thursday, and we're 6 people, and then Saturday it is Foncho, Jessica, Diana, Danny, myself, and Ariel. 6. But we
can have a conversation about large group sizes.
Yeah, at some point. But for my Thursday group, if it's 4 of us, so if 2 people cancel, we still play. And depending on the game and how important your character is, somebody else will play your character to the best of their abilities. We are not the kind of assholes who will use the character as cannon fodder, or shields.
Yeah, no,
to protect another character. We don't do that. But on the Saturday group, if one person fails, then we cancel the whole thing, which I approached this last Saturday when we went out for lunch with my friends instead of playing, and said, look, we haven't been able to play in months because one way or another, one person is not at the table. I think we should stop that because I miss my Saturday gaming. So we need to think about that one. But yeah, I think if you have a large enough group, if 4 people are around the table for role-playing games, we still play.
For me, when it's a board game, depending on whoever shows up, like for us, like once again, we play at our location where all the games are. So there's always a game we can fire out. We look at the game count, we look at how many people are showing up, and then we go accordingly. With role-playing games, I have basically two rules. Mm-hmm. And as communication, the final one is that every player at least once has the power of veto to cancel a session. So if one person can't show up, we'll still play, but that player can go, I really want to attend this one. Can we push it back a week? In which case we will. So if sometimes there are minigame circumstances, players that don't show up and don't care, very often they end up not hanging around anyway. Yeah. But there are quite a few times where I've had a player go, something's come up, and I go, okay, we're going to cancel because you want to be there, and I can see that you want to be there.
Yeah,
but beyond that,
I agree with.
Yeah. So, but for me, I'm thankfully I have unfortunately dealt with players that don't seem to care either way. Mm-hmm. And very often we find out who they are, and we become less attached to those characters. And then eventually, like I said, I have some of my closest friends are very bad tabletop role players because they just cannot be disciplined to attend. Yeah, but they're some of my closest friends, but that's just how it is. And we kind of understand that, and going like, oh, can I join up? Like, no.
Exactly. I mean, you're just honest about that, and that's it.
Like, okay. You're just too unreliable.
So you said you have a recipe. What is it?
It's a very quick one. I'll make it very quick.
Okay.
Last week, I got obsessed. This is probably a cultural thing, but have you ever had a Rice Krispie square?
No, I've had Rice Krispies. Oh, no, I beg your pardon. Yes, I have.
Yeah, the Rice Krispie square for those people. You melt some butter, you throw some marshmallows into the butter, you melt it down till you have a paste, you toss in a Rice Krispies or some type of puffed rice, you put them into a greased pan, you let them set, You don't put them in the refrigerator because they get rock hard, but they become a chewable treat. They're very easy. I've been eating these things for decades. I have not made one until last week,
Okay.
which is strange for someone that's my age to say he's never made a Rice Krispie square. I made Rice Krispie squares, but being the guy that I am, I decided to not, beyond the fact that, yeah, people will pour chocolate over it, have a nice chocolate topping, or they'll melt peanut butter and they'll pour the peanut butter, and the peanut butter will soak into and kind of perforate the Rice Krispies. So those are all things people can do. But my improvisational game night treat that last week was to play around with the base. And so I started going crazy. And as it turns out, not necessarily saying go ahead and buy these expensive sugary treats, which you should never serve your children. But it turns out a bunch of companies do now mini puffs, which means mini versions of the cereal. So when you have like there's a Reese's Pieces cereal that have these big puffs. And now there's a mini puff where they're about the size, if not smaller, than a Rice Krispie kernel. And they are a mix of peanut butter and chocolate. So I made Rice Krispie squares out of Reese's Pieces cereal, and I went crazy. I started doing it to Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I did it with what was the other one? It was Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It was Rice Krispies. It was Reese's Pieces. It was Lucky Charms, which also contains marshmallows. So I had marshmallows in marshmallows. Crazy talk. And then the piece de resistance is that I used Fruity Pebbles. Flintstones Fruity Pebbles, which is still a dish, still a cereal you can buy, and that turned out to be the one of the more successful combinations, because it turns out that you can make a cereal square from virtually any cereal. And so that's what I was doing last week for game night, was making a variety of different squares. And yeah, you can get almost any cereal and turn it into a square. Let's say a crispy square, but a crunchy square. All you need is butter, marshmallow, melted marshmallow, and then add a cereal, put it into a pan, let it set, and then you have a treat. So that is my weird, bizarro game tip. Just start making squares. I don't have Rice Krispies. Check your cereal. What do you have? Use that. You'd be surprised. It is one of the fastest improvisational treats, and depending on what cereal you have, you're going to have a completely different experience. So that is my bizarro twist for this week.
I think it's quite bizarro. I think it would have been bizarro if you told me that instead of using any other cereal, you said, "Oh, I use bacon."
Oh my God! Adding bacon to a Rice Krispie square. I think I got to do that. I think people will hate me for it.
I think that could work. Sweet and savory all in the same place. And come on, you're Canadian. You have to have some maple syrup somewhere.
The marshmallows I used were maple marshmallows.
Boom. See? I know Canadians.
Oh yeah, there's a maple everything, but maple bacon.
Yeah, I think that would work. That would work very well. Okay, so we're reaching the end of this episode, and we're actually not doing too bad. The 58 minutes. Humans, we would love to have your questions, whether it is for game night or your recipe suggestions. It would be absolutely brilliant. But for now, thank you so much for being there. It's been absolutely brilliant. Please let us know what you think about this new format, which I know that if you watch the episode completely in YouTube, this is going to feel like the usual. But if you're watching this or listening to this in separate chunks, I would love to hear what you have to say and what advice you have to give us. But for the time being, you can get hold of me on podcast at gmsmagazine.com. Also, I'm still on Twitter at GMS Magazine, although I barely ever use it. You can find me on TikTok. Well, all the links are going to be in the show notes, so please say hi. I would love to have you and see you there.
And this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. Find me on most social media channels except X. And yes, Tavern Snaps if you want some crackers, as always.
Until next show, we will talk to you very, very soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.